process and the editing process. So when I would get to my editing process, the very first thing that I would do is read my paper all the way through and just see how it sounds. This was super helpful because then you could read what you wrote and just see how it sounds without even fixing anything yet. Then the second time I would read through my paper, I would look for sentences that kind of didn't make sense. I would look for grammar mistakes, but mostly during the second time reading through my paper, I would make sure that all of my sentences make sense. And then by the third time reading through my paper during the revision process, I would look for like verbiage. So when I mean verbiage, I would make sure that during my paper I was keeping my tenses the same throughout my paper, because sometimes it's hard in certain papers to keep your tenses the same, but most of the time you should keep the tense that you're talking, and whether it be past tense or if you're talking as if it's happening currently or in the present tense, you want to keep like your tenses the same. So I would look the third time going through, I'd make sure that all of my tenses were the same, so my paper didn't sound like I was going like back and forth through time. And then, I know this seems like a very lengthy process, but my editing process was probably the process where I focused on a lot the most. Probably, I focused on every step the most, but the editing process was when I really got down to like the nitty gritty. So by the fourth time, I would read through my paper, and once I got those awkward sentences out of there that didn't really make sense, that's when I would focus on grammar and making sure that I have a wide variety of different sentence structures, and that my grammar within those sentence structures are the same, making sure I have no run-on sentences or things like that. And then once I got through all of that, I would read my paper once through again and make sure it just sounds the way that I wanted to, and deleting any fluff that was unneeded in the paper that doesn't really support your main point or your main theme or idea of the paper. And then once I got to that point, for me, I found it super helpful to send my paper to someone else and have them read it through. And I didn't want to hear any of their corrections. I just wanted them to tell me what they thought of the paper, whether it was good, whether it was bad. And if they had any specific comments on the paper, they could tell me like, oh, this part tripped me up a little bit, or this part confused me. But I found that really helpful too. And then that kind of goes with the, after the drafting process, that kind of goes with the pure editing process too, which I kind of just include in my drafting process, but it's a pure editing process. And that is the process where you can actually get peer review on how your paper sounds and what comments other people have, what they're confused on, if your main point is confusing. But the peer review process after the drafting process, and then I kind of get do another peer review process after my final edits. And then once I got the feedback from other people, that was when I would read through my paper like once or twice more, looking for just minor little details or mistakes that I didn't like. And then from there, I would be ready to finally turn in my final paper. So that was kind of the process that I chose to go through. Everyone's process is different, but this is the process that Professor McKinnon kind of outlined throughout the whole semester, and I found this process super helpful for me, and it helped me focus on my main goals with, one, taking my time throughout the writing process and doing step by step, and then two, during the drafting process, really focusing on certain paragraphs each day rather than writing the whole paper in one day, which helped me not get so overwhelmed and keep up during the whole time I had throughout the paper, so I wasn't writing the paper right before the deadline. But yeah, that was my writing process. So yeah. Okay, back again. So in this video, we're going to talk about what worked well in my writing and writing process. So the biggest thing that worked well for me in the writing process was taking each step, literally step by step. So it worked really well for me following Professor McKinnon's steps throughout the writing process, because it led to really hone in on what you wanted to put in your paper and your main points of your paper, and it allowed you to spread out the writing process throughout multiple days rather than just initially picking a topic and going with that topic and then writing the paper in 1 or 2 days. So this was the biggest thing that worked well for me during my writing process, and I would have to say that the second thing that worked the most for me was my editing process. I took the process like really seriously because it was the process when you get rid of all of the unnecessary things, the grammar mistakes, the tense mistakes, the fluff that's not needed in the paper, anything that doesn't make sense, all of that. So the editing process was, I spent like a good 2 days on the editing process. I would go through the editing process like really slowly and read it multiple times, and I actually found that it helps a lot to read your paper out loud and see how it sounds out loud, because when you read it out loud, it's different than how you read it in your head, because in your head you kind of just process the words and you read it how you want it to sound, but then when you actually read the words outside, like when you read the words out loud, that allows you to see how it actually sounds when it's read by like someone else, because someone else is going to read your paper differently than how you read your own paper. So reading it aloud really allows you to see how your paper sounds when it's not being read in your head. Another thing that worked well during my writing process is the outline, because the outline is something that I spent a lot of time on and put a lot of detail in, and putting those details in allowed me to find spaces in my essay where I could use literary devices such as imagery. Imagery was a big one that I tried to focus on, because I feel like imagery like pulls the reader in not only, but it also, when the reader is reading your paper, they're not just like reading it, but they kind of feel like they're in the story themselves rather than just reading the paper straight through. But then it allowed me to put like other things in my paper, different vocabulary words, like other literary devices that you could use, whether it was like if you wanted to use like pathos, ethos, and logos as rhetorical devices and the rhetorical analysis or other things like that. But overall, I would say that the process that I used to write my papers throughout the semester was something that worked extremely well for me, and it didn't give me that overwhelming feeling of, oh my gosh, I have this paper and I have this deadline and I need to get this done and I need to just get out of the way. It was very like a straightforward process that let you like mellow and take the writing process step by step. So these are the things that really worked well for me throughout the semester. So yeah. Okay, back for our last vlog video. So the last 2 pages of my PowerPoint presentation are talking about what are things you want to change, adopt, and how you're going to go about becoming a better writer in the future. And some things that I would like to change about my writing process or about my writing in general is I do still want to work at spreading my writing process out over multiple days, specifically the drafting process, really spreading that out, doing a paragraph or 2 paragraphs a day, because I think this is really helpful in not overloading yourself on writing and really being able to put everything you want down on the paper. Another thing that I want to change or like adopt into my writing process too is maybe like finding specific words that I can use in my paper to have like a variety of vocabulary words rather than using the same words over and over again, or words that aren't as descriptive. They're not as big of words that you can use because we are in college now, and I do want to be able to sound more like I'm writing at the college level and sound more knowledgeable on what I am writing. So I think finding words to include into my essay will be like a good thing to adopt into my writing process, because then those words can help me explain more in depth and stuff like that. And then other things that I want to adopt in my writing process I have not actually found yet. So I think going into how I want to become a better writer and how I want to do this, I think as I go throughout the rest of my college career and my career in general and just life in general, as you become older, you learn more things, your vocabulary expands, and I think the best way to become a better writer and to really just have your writing better and sound better is to just keep writing. You just have to keep writing. The only way to get better at something is to keep doing it. So I think as I go along in like my writing journey and my academic journey, I will find other things that I might want to adopt into my writing process, especially when I get to higher level classes and I need to write papers that are more about in-depth topics and things that aren't necessarily personal to myself, where you do have to use bigger descriptive words and words that and finding other words that you may have to write about that you don't know like the meaning of, whether you're writing like about a book or something like that. But I do hope my main goal is to become a better writer throughout my life, because I do actually value writing and I find it fun to write. So I think the best way for me to do this is to just continue writing and continue to work at it, and just going through my academic career will help me expand my vocabulary in itself, which will in turn help better my writing. But yeah, all right, thanks for coming, guys. Okay, so I decided to add one last video, but thanks for coming to my vlog videos. I decided this would be a fun, creative way of me to kind of talk in depth about my writing process and my writing for the semester. And I actually enjoyed I actually enjoyed making these videos a lot, so I hope you enjoyed them too. But yeah, thank you, and thank you for a good semester. Bye!